Okay, so I'm Richard Boyd, I'm the Vice Chair. I'm also the Membership Secretary, so I'm the annoying one who sends you those emails every year saying, can you please renew your subscription? So thank you all very much for doing that. And just if you are able to, and you don't currently have any standing order arrangement, then it would be great if you could change and make it a standing order, because obviously collecting cash and checks and things is quite onerous. So if any of you are willing to change, if you do that at the moment, pay by cash or check, and you're willing to change the standing order, then please feel free to do so. The forms are sent out every year, and it would make a big difference for us. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is give you a bit of an update on the tower and the Lychgate. And so, as was mentioned in the minutes, I've been co-opted onto PCC Fabric Subcommittee, and so Stuart and I have spent quite a bit of time on this topic in the last few months now, and really the reason for that is that the state of the tower is now becoming fairly critical. And so what I want to do is give you basically some insight into some of the what's going on with the tower and Lychgate. And this is really some of the findings following a visit from a structural engineer and the architect that we used, that the diocese had recommended for us. And obviously they're the experts, so just to let you know, I am not an expert, I'm a lay person. I'm not an expert in history or architecture or anything. I'm just trying to help the process along. So I will be giving you some of the information. But as I say, if I sound like I know what I'm talking about, I don't. So, but please feel free to ask questions, and if I can answer them, or Stuart can answer them, we'll do our best to. But otherwise, we can always go and get further information if you have any questions. And I would encourage you to ask questions, and if there's anything that seems odd, or whatever you want more information about, please do ask questions. Okay, so I just thought as a start, I put this picture up, which Carol Mulder found the other day in an old book about Brentwood, sort of from times past. And interestingly, that picture is taken in the sort of probably the 1920s or something like that. And it's interesting because the guy, you probably can't read it because it is a bit small, but at the bottom it says that the tower of this church has been praised by Nicholas Pevsner as perhaps the most impressive in England. And Pevsner, for those who may not know, was very famous for a work he did, a 46-volume series called The Buildings of England. He basically went around the whole of England documenting all the buildings. And so he's an absolute expert on English buildings. And so for him to make that comment, I think is quite remarkable. So I think that just serves to remind us of the historic nature of this church. It's 900 years old, at least, and that tower. There's wood in there dating again 900 years old, and it's a very, very important piece of our national heritage. So we have a real responsibility here to look after it. Okay, now let me grab my clicker. So first of all, this view here is the tower, the base of the tower on the west, from the west. And basically the comments from the architects and the structural engineers is that this is in generally very good condition. The wood is looking very strong, structurally very sound. The actual tower itself and the materials are all looking pretty good. There's one corner that I'll talk about in a minute which has a bit of problems, but other than that, most of us say it's very good for its age. Between the timbers, you notice this mix here. This is actually, and I don't know when it was done, but that's a concrete and a daub mix, and it's a concrete lime mix rather, and apparently that's not very good because it prevents proper ventilation through it for the wood behind. So the architect's recommendation is at some point, but it's not urgent, but at some point we will need to look at getting that replaced with a proper lime daub mix. But as I say, that's probably lower down in terms of our priorities. We've got, we could spend a lot of money on this church building, but so that is something we'll need to think about. And originally, interestingly, this was all a lime wash. There was sort of a white painted wash over the whole of that outside of the church here, of that tower. And if some of you have been to some villages in North of Essex, you'll see that they've done that for some of the old buildings there, because that is the original way they were done. It was taken on for style purposes, if you like, aesthetic purposes, a couple of centuries ago or whatever at some point, but that is the original condition which it would have been in when it was first erected. And the other point is that you will see in some of the timbers, there's actually concrete patches that have been made. So where the timber has had problems or is decayed, they filled it with concrete, which again is not really the best thing, and they should use a proper door mixture for that. But again, that's some point for us in the future. Now this is the famous southwest corner. Again, the picture's not brilliant, but in there is a bit of a hole and some decay. And so that will need to be looked at in more detail and repaired. But at the moment it's not a structural issue because the tower is so strong and that is not actually a load-bearing element. And we'll come to this later, but the wooden tower that was used was massively over-engineered, or is massively over-engineered, basically to demonstrate the wealth of the people who built the church at the time. So it's hugely over-engineered. So the fact that there's a bit of decay down there isn't a structural problem, but it is something that we will need to look at. And that's the same view from the southwest corner, from Mr. Brown's garden. We went in to look, and you can see that they filled that in with concrete there at some point in the past. Okay, and then this is just the north side of the base of the tower. And again, you can see there's concrete and there's fill-in, and there's tiles that have been put in at the bottom here, which again are not original, so that at some point that will probably need to be looked at and removed to see if there's any decay in the wood behind them. Okay, so if we move on to the tower, and this is obviously the critical element. So this is the tower, this is the lower intermediate stage, this is the upper intermediate stage. This cladding, you can see this is horizontal, this here, and then this is vertical. Originally, it would all have been vertical, actually. There would have been vertical cladding there as well as what the architects believe. But for now, it's been changed, and there's probably no reason to correct that again. And then that's the spire. This spire was rebuilt at the beginning of the end of the last century, or sorry, the end of the 19th century, so late 1800s. That spire was rebuilt by a chap called Chancellor, who's very famous in church buildings, and he did it for Blackmore, and so that's considered to be a very good job. He always did good jobs. But that's when it was last done. And actually a lot of the cladding is probably from around that time when it was done. So it's probably most of this wood here is probably over 100 years old. And the shingles are at least 50 years old. And they're oak shingles. And you can see they're starting to come apart. There's holes, a lot of which have been caused by woodpeckers, because woodpeckers quite like pecking away at the shingles to get at the bugs behind. And that's caused a lot of damage and holes. And as you can see, some of them have just fallen off. Over the years they start to just fall off. And so now we've got, and you'll see from the inside of the views, there's quite significant holes in the tower. And of course, that water is coming through. One of the issues with that is when water comes through, if it comes through and drips straight down onto the floor, that's not so much of a problem, actually. The problem, and this is the problem we've got, which is actually we don't see the water coming through because it's actually then going into the wood up in the tower. So that can then cause decay and so on. So it's quite a serious problem. Just a side note on bats. If bats are present, then you have to leave holes for them to get out of the tower. So there are holes in various parts of the tower and the bats can get out, and we have to allow them to keep going. We've got evidence of things like netting behind the louvers before the Bat Preservation Act came in, and you can leave them, but anything that's done after the Bat Preservation Act has to be taken down to prevent the bats having proper access. And as Marion and I saw earlier, there are bats in the tower. So yes, they're merrily flying around in there. Unfortunately,
if it's already there, it can stay there, but you can't replace it.
Exactly, you can't. What we can't do now is block all the holes to stop them getting in. Much as we would like to. Apologies for any bat lovers who may be here, but yeah. So anyway, so now that they're here, we have to leave them be and look after them, basically. Okay, so that's the north side of the tower. This is the south side of the tower from Mr. Brown's garden, so we don't tend to get as good a view of this normally. And again, as you can see on this side of the south side of the tower, there's actually been lots of repairs done. You can see all of the repairs that have been done in the past. And that's obviously not particularly good, but it's things you can do. But now the state of the cladding is such that it's beyond the state of repair. It now needs to be completely replaced. And there's a bit more closer detail again. This is from the south side, so again you can see there's lots of holes around and tiles that have fallen off. And apparently these are the hips of the upper intermediate stage, you'd be pleased to know, and those hips are in poor state. So I know how they feel because we're all getting older, our hips go, and certainly that's true of our tower. So the hips have gone and need to be replaced.
Yes, the woodpeckers are much worse on the south side, probably because woodpeckers tend to roost in pine trees, in the standard pine trees. But, a small pine tree forest there.
Yeah.
And also, they don't, we can't clap our hands and shout at them.
Yeah, Stuart says that there's not much you can do with the woodpeckers. There are some things you can do, and some churches have got various methods. And one of the things that was discussed was actually, when you lay your shingles, what you can do is you can put some metal sheeting behind it, so that even when a shingle is pecked away, there's still some protection behind. So that's something we can look at, but obviously it does tend to make the cost a lot more expensive. So we probably won't end up doing that, but we'll probably have to look at other methods of, harmless ways of discouraging the woodpeckers. Right, where are we? Okay, south view from this is the roof from the south side. There are a couple of tiles missing around about here and some other places, but generally it's looking in pretty good condition. The main problem is these overhanging trees, which are overhanging onto the dormers, and that causes them to get decay from the dampness, because they don't get proper access from the sun and the wind to dry them out. So that's something that we constantly need to talk to Mr. Brown about getting these trees cut, because it's a problem for us. Again, that's another view of the wall on the south side. Interesting, some structural things there. Brian, to you, in case you haven't spotted yourself. And that's Alicia Ryder, who's our architect. She's the architect that we've selected to help us.
And me.
And Stuart, yes.
I didn't realise that grey.
You recognise the Stuart. That's the wall. Again, you can see the trees overhanging the gutter and the dormer there. Okay, so now if we go inside the church and into the tower, what's interesting is you can see the structure. This is incredibly strong. All this bracing. This is, as I say, massively over-engineered. They could easily have used far less timber and far less bracing in the tower. But it was, as I said, it was a demonstration of the wealth of the church and the people who helped build this church at that time to do this, to over-engineer it in that way. So if you go up onto the level where the bells are, or just below where the bells are, and you look up, this is what you get, the view you see, and you can see from inside there. Now you can see the holes much more clearly obviously the daylight comes through and you can really see the holes where obviously there's water and stuff coming in. And obviously it means birds and squirrels and everything else can get in very easily as well. So when you go up there, there's always a mess of bits of trees and all kinds of birds' nests, and we found all kinds of stuff up there. And again, you can see that in the corner there, the holes, but also, you know, you can't really see it, but there's woodworm in the timbers, but it's very light and it's no longer active. So the surveyors, the structural engineers weren't concerned about it. They're more concerned about fixing the holes and stopping the water getting onto the timber, because obviously the water causes the timber to decay. And just a little view of the engineering drawing. So when the tower has been repaired in the past and had things done to it, we've had engineering drawings done. So there's a whole raft of engineering drawings, which is good news because it means they don't have to be redone. So the architects are able to use that. And they use these drawings and then obviously the visual guides that they've taken and information they've seen to pull together the specifications for the work that will need to be done. And then just finally to talk a bit about the Lychgate. The shingling here has completely had it, in the words of the engineer, and is really falling apart, so that it does actually is probably the most urgent thing that needs doing. And again, this is probably something to do with the trees around. There's lime trees and things like that around, which cause some of the moss and other materials on these Lychgates, and then that causes the decay. But so there's obviously not what we can do about that, but that is why they are more in a worse state, as it were, than the shingles on the tower itself. So that will all need to be done. Apparently that was designed by Chancellor and built by Chancellor in 1900 when he did the spire. That was when the Lychgate was built. So if there's any original photos, I mean, and I know actually I've talked to Roger Keeble, he's got some quite old photos, but any old photos that people have or are aware of would be very helpful, because it helps us when we want to get things done. If we can see the state it was originally, it helps us when we apply for grants, and it helps us in terms of the faculty to say this is how it was and that's why we want to do it in this same way. And again, you know, that's got the oak shingles. When we get the specifications for the tower and the Lychgate, they will look at whether we should have oak or cedar shingles. There's pros and cons of the two, and there's price differences, so that's one of the options we'll be looking at, is whether we redo it in oak or whether we can do it in cedar. That's one of the things the architect will advise us on.
Where did they get the oak or other shingles from? Oak, does the oak shingles come from oak tree?
Yeah.
I mean, there's not many of those.
Yeah, no, that's right. I mean, a lot of them are sourced, I think, from places like Canada and so on. So, yeah.
It was quite an art to make them.
Yes, and it's an art to make them, exactly. Yeah, they're special design. So, and this is what Alicia is now being commissioned to do, which is to draw up the specifications of the works that need to be done. So that's, as you can see, that's a lot of money, £4,500, to actually draw up the specifications. And that's the specifications that will then allow people to bid on the cost of the work and do tendering. So, but it's important that it's done properly, because exactly as Stuart said, the design of the shingles is very important, and also the materials that are used and the way that they're all put together is really important that it's done properly, and we have to maintain, obviously, the outside of the church in the right condition. So that's part of what she will be specifying in the specifications that she draws up. Now, then this is the scary bit. You know, when you look at what we think this is going to cost, the architects and the structurers won't give you a number, because they don't want to be held to any kind of number. But you know, kind of unofficially, they've said they expect this is probably going to be about £150,000 to do the tower and the Lychgate, but that's the cladding and all the shingles. And part of that is the expenses around things like the scaffolding, because we have to have scaffolding put up, and the scaffolding's got to go right across, obviously, the top of the church, the nave and the aisles. It's got to go down the other side into Mr. Brown's garden and go up around the tower, and that scaffolding all has to be specifically designed and engineered to be correct, and then it's put up, and then once it's up, then they take off all the old materials and put on the new. So it is a substantial piece of work. As you heard earlier from John, we've got £60,000 in our funds, so we haven't got enough to cover something like 150,000. So yeah, so what we're going to have to start doing is more fundraising. We will also be looking to apply for grants. Now, grants are a little bit of a, you know, you have to know how much you want before you can apply for the grant. So so basically, with the specification that Alicia will do, we can then use that to get the costs, and based on the costs, we can then apply for grants. So it's a bit of a kind of catch-22. You have to spend some money in order to figure out how much money you're really going to need to spend, and then you can go and apply for grants. So in other words, we can't just go and say, oh, we think we need £150,000, we get kicked out of court. We have to say, we know exactly what it's going to cost, because we've done a cost analysis, we've got proper costings in, and then we can go, and also we can contribute this much money ourselves, and then the grant authorities will then say, okay, well, we can match your funding, or we can give you, you know, double the amount of funding, etc. So that's the process we then need to go through. So it will be a few weeks now for Alicia to go and do the specification work. Once you've done the specification work, we can get tenders, we can get costs. Once we've got costs, we can apply for grants. Once we've got the grant approved and we've got enough money, we can do the work. So this is not a quick process, as you can imagine, but like any long journey, first step is the important step, so you've got to take one step at a time, and that's what we're doing. So we've got going, and as I say, once we've got some costing, we'll have some better ideas of what the actual number, big number we're really going to be looking to get. But at least we're on the way, and as I said, you all can see the holes in the tower. You know, we need to get going on it. So it's important we get cracking. So that's it, really. Hopefully that was useful for you and enlightening and scary, as I said, because it's a lot of money. But it's also an incredibly important church and very historic, and we need to look after it. So we will also get a lot of support, you know, with fundraising tools like Just Giving and so on. Those are things that can go worldwide. So you know, we can publicise the need for funding, and I'm quite sure we can actually get quite a lot of people around the world being quite willing to contribute to this. But as I say, it's going to be something we've got to initiate and drive. So a lot of work to do, but we're looking forward to it, and it's exciting. And we'll be able to say that we're the ones who kept the church tower going for another 50 or 100 years, hopefully. So, any last questions?
Would it be just a matter of pruning the trees, or would it have to, or would it be up to Mr. Brown to let us in to do pruning?
Yeah, what we do is we ask him. He has a gardener, and he does. Yeah. He gets the trees trimmed himself by his gardener. But
well, he's actually had the very big cherry pickers in the past. But 2 years ago, he had them in his grounds. I kept on saying, are they going around there? Because I'd asked him that, and they didn't. And I don't think those trees have been cut back. But when we were out there with the architect earlier this year, what's rather worrying is the trunks look as if they're leaning away from the church now, and the ground by the church wall looks as if it's heaving up. So I'm trying to keep an eye on it. So in fact, I think the foliage has come away because the trunks have leant away a bit from the church. And we've had a tree right along there fall down before, many years ago. Now, I was going to say, Simon Marks and Ed Wharton, who were the two experts who came here, they said, in addition to what Pevler said, this church, particularly because of the tower, is one of the top 100 churches in the UK.
Yeah. So one of the top one, in case we couldn't hear what Stuart was saying, Stuart was saying that the two people who came around, Simon Marks from the architects and Ed Morton, the structural engineer, they were saying that this tower is one of the top 100, this church is one of the top 100 in the UK because of the tower. So it's highly significant. And I think because we were joking about maybe we should put plastic cladding up or something, you know, to make it last longer. And he was saying, you know, if you did that, you'd get letters to the Times. So I assure you, there's a lot of people that would be shocked, would be made aware of that. So it is very important. And Stuart was also saying about the trees at the side here, that Mr. Brown gets his garden and uses cherry pickers to cut them back. But actually, there's a concern that they may actually be falling away from the church, but there's definitely some stuff there we have to keep an eye on. I mean, ideally, we'd love to have that land back at some point, but that's another.
It's all Cardinal Wolsey's fault.
It's all Cardinal Wolsey, yeah.
And presumably all the work will have to be done at once, because once you've got the scaffolding up, you can't put scaffolding up and down. So you do need, apart from the Lychgate, you need to raise all the money for it all to be done at once. Yeah, so Debbie was saying that the work is going to have to be done all at once. So once we get, you know, we're going to have to raise the money, because it's not something we could do where we could spend 20,000 and then leave it for a year and then spend another 20,000. The problem is you've got to do it all at once. You've got to put the scaffolding up, and then once the scaffolding's up, as fast as you can, do all the work. And whilst you're up there, you know, you might as well do the whole lot. So, you know, it's just the economics of it are, you've got to do it all. And, you know, because you could potentially try and do some bits of repairs, but again, by the time you put scaffolding up and everything else, it's better and easier just to do the whole lot. And of course, the other thing that the structural engineer, Ed Morton, was saying that we do have to be mindful of is that when we take the cladding off and the shingles and we see the timbers beneath, he said, you know, we'll probably find there are some decay and some problems that will then need to be sorted out at that point. Obviously, visually they can see it looks fine from the visual inspection they've done, but they can't see what's behind the timbers, so behind the cladding and so on. So again, we've got to be prepared for additional costs as well. So even if the cost of doing all that, say, comes to £150,000, we'll probably need to have another £10,000 or £20,000 at least ready and available if they take the stuff off and they say, oh, we've got to do some extra work.
So those amounts don't take in the cost of scaffolding or anything like that?
Yeah.
Oh,
well,
it does.
And again, that is just a guesstimate. So please don't go away saying, we know it's going to cost £150,000, right? It might come in and cost £90,000, I don't know. I mean, on the other hand, it might cost £250,000. And that's why the architects don't want to say anything. They want to wait until they've done their specification and then they've gone out to tender and they see what prices people come back with. Because it's how long is a piece of string. So yes, but that price, whatever it will include the cost of the scaffolding, it will include the cost of all the wood, it will cost of doing it all the work and everything. But whether it's 150 or 250, we don't know yet.
No.
Has Ed Morton given an indication of his fee for designing the scaffolding?
Yeah, so the fee for designing the scaffolding, Ed Morton said he thought it would cost several £1,000s to design the scaffolding. Yeah. But again, that will come in just to design the scaffolding, then not putting it up,
no.
to design it, because it has to be designed in a way that can not damage the church.
Not just a matter of analysis.
No.
We might be able to use our American friends, our American connection.
Well, yeah, I mean, that's the other thing. There's a Disney plaque up there, so if anyone thinks that is any relationship with Walt Disney, useful to know.
I was thinking of the airmen.
And the airmen, the bombers, No, again, I mean, that's right. This is the sort of thing we need to make people aware of it, and I think that's why for a lot of us, it's important to get this going, and we've known for a while this was going to be coming, and that's why, as John said, we've had a tower in repair pot, money set aside, but until you really know exactly how much it's going to cost and what it's going to take, it's hard to get people enthused about it or engaged. But now that we're down the road, as I say, fairly quickly, we will have those details, and then we can start telling off people who we think might be or willing or interested in helping us.
Has any thought been given to restoring the bells to ring on wheels or not?
Yeah, so there's a question with Brian's question, is has there been any thought given to restoring the bells? It's a good question. We need to think about that, because as you may be aware, we only have one bell. Is it one bell?
No, we've got 5 bells.
So we have 5
they
bells.
Sorry, the bells are chimed
That's right.
with little hammers,
Yes.
so one person can play all 5 bells. If we started swinging them, we'd have to have 5 people to ring the bells.
Yeah.
That's the
Yes.
problem. That's a problem. The other thing is that once they're swinging, we wondered why they stopped swinging them. Was the tower swinging away from the church? Because when you're in a bell tower, they do tend to swing about. Because the heaviest bell is 10 hundredweights. If that's swinging, and it's a wooden structure. I've been in a stone structure that I could feel it swaying as the bells were rung.
But if it didn't sway, it would fall down.
Well, but it might, if it sways away from the church, that's a problem. So we haven't really gone into that in great detail, but they are on wheels that could be swung.
Yeah.
But it would be very expensive.
I do know somebody who could look at that.
Well, it might be worth, something we could look at. But as Stuart said, the question is that going to be good for the town or not?
Yeah, I mean, we the thing is, we wouldn't do anything unless it was part of this plan, because you'd have to have complete access again, like we're going to get when we do this work.
Exactly.
So it would have to be part of this. We couldn't go back afterwards and do it, really.
Okay, is that it? Should we have our tea and coffee?
Thank you very much.